Good morning, period 4 honors. This is your chapter 5 semester exam review session. And the way I am going to do your review session is I will write a problem on the screen. I will ask you to pause the video. At that time, I would expect you to work the problem out. And then when you are ready, start the video again, and I will show you a picture of my problem worked out, and I will kind of go over a couple of things on each problem. That way this video won't take forever if I actually work the problem out step by step. Alright, so let's begin. Let's make sure you have paper and pencil and ready. There's at least 15 problems that we will do during this review session. Alright, here's number 1. It is an inequality. You're going to solve it and graph it. Okay, so at this time, please pause the video and work the problem out. And when you're ready, begin the video again and I'll go over the answer. Okay, here's the answer to number 1. And if you will notice in the first step when I multiplied both sides by -3, please notice that I actually had to switch the sign. So right here, make sure you do the same thing. And then as I go down at the end, when I divide both sides by -2, I also had to flip the sign because I divided both sides by a negative. So your answer is x is greater than or equal to -12. Okay, here's number 2. Solve and graph the inequality. It's got several steps to it. So go ahead, pause the video. When you're done, go ahead and start the video again and I'll go over my work. Okay, on this problem you will notice that I did the distributive on the left first, and then I did the distributive on the right in the second step. So again, I'm going to point out some places where I did all of my steps. So when I did the distributive property here, I got -12x plus 20. And on the right side, when I distributed -3, I got positive 6x plus 21. So make sure you watch your signs. Alright, when I combine like terms on the left, I got -18x plus 20 is less than 4x plus 21. I subtracted 4x from both sides. Now remember, you and I may be doing this differently, so we should still end up with the same answer. The way I did it, I did have to flip the sign at the end because I divided both sides by a negative, so I had to flip the sign. And I got x is greater than -1 over 22. And don't forget, when you get a fraction answer, you've got to tell what numbers it falls between. So -1 over 22 falls in between 0 and -1. So the answer is x is greater than -1 over 22. Okay, problem number 3 is translate and solve. You do not have to graph the answer. The quotient of a number in -6 increased by -6 is no more than -18. This should be an is, not in. Okay, again, you're going to pause the video, solve it, and translate it, and then come back and make sure that we have the same answer. Alright, so here's the answer to number 3. So first of all, I'm going to point out a couple of things. When it says quotient, we need to remember quotient means division, so I did a fraction bar. The quotient of a number in -6, x over -6, increased by, so that's addition, increased by -6 is no more than. So no more than would be less than or equal to -18. Now, on the semester exam, this will go on one blank to show me you translated the problem right. And then, of course, you're going to solve it. So this area is my solving. And then there will be another blank for the actual answer. So when I solved it, I did end up having to multiply both sides by -6. Had to flip the sign. So you'll notice it's flipped right here. And the answer is x is greater than or equal to 72. Don't forget to study your chart for all the words so that you know which words stand for what inequalities. Problem number 4, we're going to start reviewing compound inequalities. So number 4, we're going to solve and graph this compound inequality. And again, take some time to work it out. When you're done, start the video again and check your work against mine. Alright, so here's the answer to number 4. Some things to point out here is back at the beginning of the problem, if you will notice, it didn't have a word and or, so we've talked about how if it doesn't say and or, it's automatically an and. Now in this particular problem, we cannot work it out by doing whatever we're going to do to all three sides because there's a variable on all three parts. So I have to break it into two inequalities. So the first inequality is this one right here. So I wrote it, negative 2x minus 3 is greater than negative 4 times quantity x minus 1. And then the second inequality is this part over here, which is negative 4 times the quantity x minus 1 is greater than or equal to negative 7x plus 3. So what I did was I went through and I solved both sections, or both parts, and the first answer I got was x is greater than 7/2, and the second part I got was x is greater than or equal to negative 1/3. Now here's my rough copy of my my graph. So remember, for the word and, we're looking for overlap. So where do these two graphs overlap? They overlap right here. So the answer to the problem is only x is greater than 7/2. So if you'll notice, here's my final graph, my final answer. And what I would have to put on my semester exam on the answer blank, I would put this part here, x is greater than 7/2, and x is greater than or equal to negative 1/3, and then I would put this actual graph as my answer. Okay? Alright, here's number 5. Again, you're going to solve it and graph it. Alright, pause the video, work it out. When you're ready, begin the video again. Alright, here's the answer to number 5. This time we're looking for, it's an or. I did have to flip the sign on the left side because I divided both sides by a negative. So the left side gave me the answer x is greater than or equal to 9/4. And on the right side, because I had to multiply both sides by 2 over negative 1, again I had to flip the sign, so x is less than or equal to 18. Now when you graph this one, you will notice it's an or, and it's going in opposite direction. I mean, it's going... yeah, they are going in the opposite directions. And remember, in an or, anything that's shaded at least one time is an answer. So if you notice on this graph, everything is shaded at least one time, which means the answer is all solutions. Alright, here's problem number 6. Again, solve it and graph it. When you're done, start the video again so I can go over my answer. Here's the answer to number 6. I had to, let's see, I had to flip the sign right here because I divided both sides by a negative 2. Got x is less than negative 1. And on the right problem, again, I had to divide both sides by negative 6, so I had to flip the sign. When I graphed it, we're going the opposite way. And because it's an and I'm looking for overlap, and I had no overlap, the final answer was no solutions. Okay, problem number 6, we're going to review solving absolute value equations. So on this one, again, you're going to solve it and graph it. When you're ready, start the video again to see my answer. Alright, here's the answer for number 7. Alright, so remember, in a compound inequality, the first thing you have to do is get the absolute value by itself. So it took me all the way down to here to get the absolute value by itself, and it's not equal to a negative sign, so I can set up my two situations. Remember, one is going to be the positive 3 and one is going to be the negative 3. When I solved both of the absolute value equations, I got x is 1/2 and x is 5/6. So when I graphed it, they both fell between 0 and 1, so my two answers are 1/2 and 5/6. Alright, this is problem number 8. Solve and graph the absolute value equation. Again, work the problem out, and when you're ready, begin the video again to see my answer. Okay, here's the answer to number 8. And when I isolated the absolute value this time, I got down to the absolute value of 2 times quantity x minus 4 equals negative 3. Because you cannot have an absolute value that's equal to a negative number, I don't even have to go any farther, so my final answer is no solutions. Okay, so now we're going to review graphing inequalities in two variables. So here is number 9, and go ahead, pause the video, work it out, and come back and I will go over the answer with you. Alright, so on number 9, graphing inequalities in two variables, remember we don't actually graph the inequality first, we actually graph the line y equals negative 2/3 x plus 4, which is already in slope-intercept form, so my slope is negative 2/3 and my y-intercept is 4. So I first went up to 4 on the y-axis, and I put a point on 4, and then my slope is rise over run. So from my y-intercept, I went down 2 and I went right 3. And because the inequality was less than, that means I'm going to do a dotted line, which I did, and then I have to pick a test point. And as you recall, I always used 0, 0 if possible. When I plugged in 0, 0 into the original inequality, remember you always go back to the original inequality, you get 0 is less than negative 2/3 times 0 plus 4. So negative 2/3 times 0 is just going to be 0. And so my final statement says 0 is less than 4. Because 0 is less than 4, which is true, what that means is because 0, 0 is right here and it works, that means all these points on this side are going to work. So I shaded in the left side of the line. Okay, here's problem number 10. Again, you're going to solve it and graph it. Alright, come back when you're ready and I'll go over the answer. Alright, here's the answer to number 10. Now on this one, the equation was actually in standard form. So the first thing I did was I showed you how I would find the slope and the y-intercept and the x-intercept using standard form. So here's all my work for that. If you prefer putting it in slope-intercept form, I did that down here for you. So whichever way you chose to do it, which was is fine. One thing I want to point out here on the slope when I did standard form, because my a was negative, when I plugged it into the simple formula, negative a over b, it became positive 3/4. Okay, when I went over and graphed it, I have a point at 0, negative 3 for my y-intercept. I have a point at 4, 0 for my x-intercept. I went up 3 and right 4. Because my inequality was a greater than or equal to, that means I should have a solid line. And then I tested 0, 0. When I tested 0, 0, it came out to be another true statement, which means because 0, 0 is on this side and it works, I would shade in the left side. Okay? Alright, here's problem number 11. Now we're going to start reviewing the cumulative material from the year. So number 11 is going to be a order of operations review. Okay, here's the answer to number 11. A couple of things I want to point out is right here when you take negative 4 squared and there's no parentheses, that means you're going to take 4 squared, which is 16, and put the negative on it, so it's negative 16. Now remember, had that been negative 4 squared in parentheses, that would have been negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. Alright, so I did that first, and then I did the 3 squared is 9, and I did 5 minus 9 is negative 4. In the next step, I did 9 minus 2 is 7, and I did negative 4 squared in parentheses, like what I talked about right here. That's positive 16. Now in the next section in the brackets here, you do not do 2 minus 9. You have to do multiplication first, so that's 63. 2 minus 63 is negative 61. Now be careful right here in this step. You don't do negative 16 minus 6. You do the multiplication first, so negative 16 times negative 61 is positive 366. Negative 16 plus 366 is 350. 350 minus 336 is, 350 minus 16 is 336. Alright, number 12, we're going to start solving equations. Okay, here's the answer to number 12. Don't forget this is actually a proportion. So the way you solve a proportion is you cross multiply. So I cross multiplied negative 3 times negative x plus 2 first. And then I cross multiplied the 2x minus 4 times 7. And my final answer, when I divided both sides by 11, was 2. Alright, here's problem number 13. Alright, on problem number 13, I'm going to point out a few things here. I did the distributive property first on both sides. And then don't forget, at this point, it's time to get rid of the fractions, make life easier. So I multiplied everything by 12. Couple of things to make sure you remember here. This term doesn't have a fraction, but I still go ahead and multiply it by 12, so I get negative 72x. And my final answer to the problem is 23/48. Okay, on problem 13, it's got 3 parts. I have 3 problems I want you to find the slope of. So do all 3 and then come back and check your answers. Okay, sorry, this was problem 14. Alright, so slope, and I'm only doing slope. So just a reminder, the formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And my first problem, I labeled the points for you, x1, y1, x2, y2. When I figure out the slope, I came up with negative 5/15. And you need to remember to reduce your slope. On B, when I did negative 6 minus negative 2, I got negative 4, and 4 minus 4 is 0. When 0 is underneath the fraction, that's undefined slope. 8, negative 3, negative 9, negative 3. Negative 3 minus negative 3 is 0. Negative 9 minus 8 is negative 17. So therefore, if 0 is on the top, it's 0 slope. Okay, here's problem number 15. Now we're going to practice writing the equations of lines. So this problem, we're going to write the equation in standard form. And it passes through the point negative 6, 3, and is parallel to negative 3x equals negative 4y plus 12. Alright, on problem number 15, standard form, which, reminder, that means I want my answer in ax plus by equals c form, passes through negative 6, 3, and parallel to negative 3x equals negative 4y plus 12. And I need to remember that parallel lines have the same slope. So I found the slope of the beginning equation both ways, just in case you chose to do whichever way you did. So on the left side, what I did was I put it in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. And when I did that, I found the slope was 3/4. And on the right-hand side, I put it in standard form, or almost standard form. And slope is negative a over b. Now because my a is a negative 3, and when I plug it into negative a negative is going to make a positive 3/4. Plug in 3/4 equals y minus 3 over x plus 6. Remember, you use the slope formula now. Cross multiply, because I'm going to standard form, I'm going to cross multiply the x first. And when I work this out, I get 3x minus 4y equals negative 30 is my final answer. And I'm going to check. A is positive. Good. No fractions, no decimals, and it's in the form of ax plus by equals c. Okay, last problem for our review session. Number 16. Find the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that has the same x-intercept as negative 4x equals negative 2y plus 16. And is perpendicular to negative 2x equals 9 minus 3y. And the answer to number 16. So first of all, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And we want the same x-intercept as negative 4x equals negative 2y plus 16. So I started by finding the x-intercept of negative 4x equals negative 2y plus 16. So to find the x-intercept, you let y equal 0, which I did. And I came up with my x-intercept is negative 4, 0, so there's my point. And then it's perpendicular to negative 2x equals 9 minus 3y. So the first thing I did was I put it in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, and I found my slope was 2/3. If you use standard form instead, then my work is right here. I got negative 2x plus 3y equals 9, and the slope formula is negative a over b. Again, a is negative, so it becomes a positive when you put it in negative a, so my slope is 2/3. Now, perpendicular means opposite reciprocal. So if the slope is 2/3, the opposite is negative, and reciprocal, flip it over, is 3/2. So I took my new slope, negative 3/2, and my new point, negative 4, 0, and I plugged it into the slope formula. Negative 3/2 equals y minus 0 over x plus 4. I cross multiplied, and remember, you're going to slope intercept form. So my final answer is y equals negative 3/2 x minus 6. Alright, this ends the review session. So at this point, if you can do all these 16 problems, you should be ready for the final Chapter 5 test / semester exam. Have a good day.